Tonight we want to look at Jehovah Nissi or Jehovah Nissi. The Lord is my banner. The Lord is my banner. To understand this, we have to look at the context in which this declaration, this statement was made. And for this, we go back to the Old Testament, the book of Exodus. I pray you have your Bibles with you and you're reading along with me. The book of Exodus, in chapter number 17, verse number 8, where it starts. It says, "Now Amalek came and fought with Israel in Reverend. Moses said to Joshua, 'Choose us some men, and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand.' And so Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill." To give us some context as to where we are in the journey of the children of Israel, they have just come out of 400 years of slavery. God heard their petition. For 400 years they had been slaves in the country, in the land of Egypt. They were forced to do labor. They were slaves. They were not soldiers. They were slaves. They were not fighters. They were slaves. They were not an army yet. God himself brings them out by sending plague after plague after plague upon Egypt. Finally, on a horrific night, God tells Egypt, the children of Israel, to put blood over the doorposts because he was going to send death angel through. And everywhere where God did not see the blood, he was going to spill blood. He killed males in Egypt. Pharaoh could not wait to get rid of the children of Israel at this point. As a matter of fact, Egypt pays them to leave. And as they go off, the Bible says that Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he chases after the children of Israel whom he just let go. They get to the Red Sea. Y'all have heard me tell the story. They don't know what to do. Moses looks in his hand, and there is a rod in his hand. This rod has special significance because when God had first called Moses, the question that God asked Moses is, "What is in your hand?" God tells him that everything that he needs to lead the people from bondage to freedom is already in his hand. He tells Moses what you need to go through your journey. You can stop making excuses. It's already in your hand. It's right there in your hand. And it was this rod. This rod is something that he was using because he was a shepherd at the time. But this rod is symbolic of more than just being a shepherd. This rod symbolizes the gifts that God had placed in him. And God tells him that everything that you need, I have already placed in your hand. Now, I don't know who needs to hear that tonight, but everything that you need, God has already given it to you. It's already in your hand. And here it is. They come to the Red Sea. Moses holds up the rod. The waters part. Israel walks through on what the text describes as dry land. God tells Moses and the people of Israel, take a good look. Take a good look. Because the enemy that you see today, you will never, not ever, not ever see again. When they get to the other side, the waters, the Egyptians see what Israel did. He starts walking. They start running through the Red Sea, determined they're going to catch them and they're going to bring them back. But the waters collapse. Pharaoh and his army are drowned up in the Red Sea. That's chapter 14. Chapter 15, Moses, his sister, grabs a tambourine and leads praise and worship. And they start singing and giving God the praise. Have you ever had a radical, crazy praise? After God did something for you that you didn't know how you were going to get out of, you didn't know how you were going to make it through, and God comes through for you, and on the other side, you owe God a praise. She grabs a tambourine, leads the women in praise and worship, and right there they begin blessing God. Then they run into some bitter waters. Y'all heard me preach about this a few weeks ago. Some bitter waters that they take a tree, throw it in the waters, and the waters become sweet. And from there, we get the name of I am Jehovah Rapha. I am the God who heals you. That's chapter 15. Chapter 16, they're wandering in the wilderness and they're hungry. And God provides for them bread from heaven. God provides for them bread from heaven. Called it manna. God provided literally everything they needed to eat. Now we're in chapter 17. The early part of this chapter, they want water because they're thirsty. Moses is instructed by God to hit the rock with the rod. He hits the rock with the rod, water comes out. And it ends because Moses names the place Massa and Meribeth. This is in verse number 7. I didn't put this on the screen. He calls it Massa and Meribeth because they ask God, is God among us or not? He names it that almost as shame to them because they seem to have forgotten the previous 5 chapters where God has killed the army of Israel, that God has killed the army of Egypt. Well, first he allows them to escape with all of Egypt's wealth. Then he drowns up Pharaoh's army in the Red Sea, gives them water that was bitter and turns it sweet, rains down manna from heaven, and now they ask, is God for us or is he not for us? I think this verse is important because it sets the tension for what's about to happen next. They're asking, is God for us or is he not for us? And maybe you've never been there, but I believe there's a couple of people on the stream that you feel attack after attack after attack. And you ask yourself, is God for me? Am I wasting my time going to church? Am I wasted? There's other stuff I could do on a Wednesday night than stop what I'm doing and watch Bible study on the phone. Is God for us or not? Is God really for me? Verse 8, verse 7, they asked that question. And in verse 8, Amalek attacks. Now, I need to explain to you that whenever you see Amalek, the Amalekites, whenever you see that name represents the enemy of God. Yeah. Whenever you see the Amalekites or the name Amalek, it represents the enemy of God. Here it is, Israel is not bothering the Amalekites. They are simply trying to travel to the land God has promised them, and the Amalekites come to fight with them. Israel don't want no smoke. Again, as I told you, they were not fighters. They were not soldiers. They were leaving from slavery and trying to go to their promise. They don't want no problems. But the Amalekites come to fight them anyhow. Have you ever had someone, you ain't had no problem with them, but yet they had a problem with you? They ain't got no problem with the Amalekites, but the Amalekites decide we gonna jump on them. Whenever you see Amalekites, understand that this is the Old Testament representation of evil. Evil comes to fight them. Moses says to Joshua, I need you to get some men. We ain't gonna be able to talk our way out of this. We ain't gonna be able to reason our way out of this. We're gonna have to fight. And this is what I need you to do. I need you to get some men, go down there, get ready to fight. I'm gonna go up on top of this hill. Verse 15, or verse 10, I'm sorry. My eyes getting old. Verse 10, Joshua did as Moses said to him, and he fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went on top of the hill. And it was so, verse 11, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. What's in Moses' hand? Is he just holding his hand in the air? Is it that rod again? That God told him that everything that you needed was in your hand. One of the beauties of growing in your relationship with Christ is getting to the place where you value and understand what God has placed in your hand. I can admit that I wasted time and energy in my life and in my ministry looking at what was in somebody else's hand. But God did not call you to worry about what's in somebody else's hand. God is asking you, what are you doing with what I have put? Moses is holding up what God has given him. When he's using what God has given him, Israel gets the victory. It's right there. It's right there. Verse number 11. When Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. Yeah. Here is Moses. He's on this hill. He's holding this rod in his hand, and he's holding it up, right? He's holding it up. The rod is not heavy. It's not heavy. But even when you hold a light thing, eventually you get tired. You get tired of holding it up. You get tired of lifting it up. You get tired of holding it in the air. And notice Moses, he cannot give it to Aaron. Aaron is called. Aaron, his children become the Levites. Aaron, there is an anointing on Aaron's life. Aaron, matter of fact, is what we would consider to be the assistant pastor. But Aaron cannot hold up what God has given Moses. Moses has to hold it in the air. What I'm trying to tell you is nobody else can do for you what God has placed in your hand. You have to hold it up. And here it is. Moses is holding it in the air as long as he can. And in verse 12, Moses' hands become heavy. Because no matter how light it is, and even though God has given it to you, and even though it's a blessing to you, if you keep holding it up long enough, you're going to get tired. And so they took a stone, they put it under him. He sat on the stone, and Aaron and Hur supported his hands. One on one side, one on the other side, so that his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. God, this is the blessing of prayer partners or accountability partners. I don't need people around me to just cheer me on. I don't need you to just say, go, Moses, go. Hold it up, Moses, hold it. You got it, Mo. Hold it, Mo. No. They said, we gonna help Moses hold this thing up. Because we understand that the victory comes when we're all operating together. That they can't do what he can do, but they decide to support him and hold him up. Is there somebody in your circle right now that you're looking at them and you can tell they're getting tired? Is there somebody in your circle right now that you can look at and you can see their arms is starting to shake? How can I support you? So not that I can be praised, so that God can get the glory. They come along, they support him, help him hold up his stick. And while they're supporting him and helping him hold up the stick, Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Now, to print this out, I used the New King James. I should have switched for the Old King James. In the Old King James, it says Joshua discomforted them. That meant he killed them with the sword. The victory comes. See this now. Moses is on the hill. Moses is not the fighter. That's not his job. He's on the hill holding what God has given him. He's literally lifting it as an offering back to God. He's holding it up, lifting it to God. There are people that are coming along to support and hold up his hands because his hands is getting tired and his hands are shaking and he doesn't know how much longer he can hold this up. So there are people supporting him. And while they're supporting him, Joshua was down there doing the fighting. But they're all working together in unison. Joshua is not down there fighting for Moses. He's fighting for God. The two people that are holding up the arms, they're not doing it for Moses. It looks like it, but they're doing it for God. Moses is holding a stick in the air, not to look important, but as an offering. God, I thank you for what you have placed in my hands. And I don't know any other way to use it than to hold it back up to you, who are the one who gave it to me. Are you using your gift to glorify God? Or are you using your gift to glorify you? Are you using your gift so that God be praised? Or are you using your gift so people can talk about how gifted and anointed and talented you are? Understand, I'm not hating on the gifted and the talented people. I'm looking in the feed. I can see some gifted and talented people on the stream. But as gifted and as talented as you are, you cannot do this without some people supporting you. You cannot do this without somebody fighting for you. You cannot do this alone. Here is the model. And it's not by chance or by accident that when Moses is tired of standing, that they sit him on a rock. That rock represents Jesus. That rock, that security, that's something that I can sit on and find my rest. That's Jesus. Moses, hands in the air, holding the rod. Joshua and Hur, holding his arms. Sitting on the rock. Joshua's fighting people. Verse 14. The Lord said to Moses, write this for a memorial in the book and recount it or tell it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Now, if I'm Joshua, I know what just happened. Why you got to tell me what just happened? Here's what God is saying. God is saying, I need you to tell Joshua, because Joshua represents the next generation. Joshua represents the next generation of leadership. Joshua represents the future. Joshua represents those who are going to receive the promise that we're not going to get to. Here's the thing. They're marching towards the promised land. There are only two people that are in this group that reach the promised land. All the rest of the people that get into the promised land are youth now. They don't even understand what's going on. He says, I need you to make sure Joshua knows what happened here today. I need the next generation to understand what God has done for us right here. And that them folk, they are not our people. That's what you see it for yourself. Verse 14. Write this for a memorial in the book. Recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance from Amalek from under heaven. He says, the next generation needs to know what happened here today. If our children don't know what God has done for our families, for our legacies, it's our fault. It's our responsibility to tell them what God has done for us. Not just our personal testimony, even our family testimony, our generational testimony, our testimony. I see you, Tamika. I may not get there with you, but I need you to know this is what God has done for us. This is in keeping with the African oral tradition. Yes, write it in the book, but I need you to tell it to Joshua. I need you to tell it to Joshua because in the book, he may not get all the subtle clues. That's one of the things I love and hate about texting. When you text somebody, they can't get all of the emotion. No, I need you to not just write this down. I don't need you to just text this. I need you to tell him this so he understands how significant what happened right here was. It's our responsibility. And I'm not trying to, I'm just going to say it. It's not the school's responsibility to teach our children about Black history. It's not the school's responsibility to teach them what God has done for us. It's not the school's responsibility to make sure that our children understand redlining and make sure that our children understand separate but unequal and make sure that our children understand Jim Crow. It's our responsibility to teach our children the history of what God has done for us. After Moses tells him, make sure Joshua knows what happened, Moses builds an altar and he calls it Jehovah Nissi. The Lord is my banner. Now, what does that mean? The Lord is my banner. I'm so glad you asked. It's significant because banners are raised to celebrate and honor. When you play sports and you win a championship, one of the great privileges is you raise a banner celebrating your accomplishments, and it's lifted into the rafters. Mm-hmm. That even when and y'all know I'm a Cowboys fan, and the Cowboys have 5. That's right, count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Super Bowl banners hanging in the AT&T Stadium in Texas. There are 5 banners there that every time they won, they would raise a banner. Last time they won a Super Bowl, they weren't even in the stadium that they're in now. But because they had won them, they took their banners with them to celebrate their accomplishment. In high school, the team, one of the teams I played for, won a champion. The water polo team has a banner. Yeah. Banners. And it's a unifying thing that we can celebrate the accomplishment that we've made. When they say Jehovah is our banner, the Lord is our banner, we recognize that we didn't win this fight. That God won this battle for us. That this wasn't the skill of Joshua with the sword. That wasn't it. Because whenever the stick would come down, whenever the rod would come down, they lose. It wasn't that Joshua was that nice with his stick and with his hands. That wasn't it. Come on, somebody ought to celebrate some roller banners. Some roller banners. But they recognize what won us this fight. And not just this fight, but every fight that we're going to fight from now on, what's going to give us the victory is the Lord. We ain't going to do this on our own. God is going to be the one to get us the victory. Here's my question for you. Those of you that graduated college, did you do it on your own? Those of you that just graduated high school, did you do it on your own? Those of you who had to fight spiritual warfare in your house, did you win that by yourself? Those of you that are fighting against generational curses, did you do that by yourself? Or was it the Lord fighting for you? I can remember, I see you, Miss Chevette. I can see you. When I went to college, my church blessed me before I went. My father bought a whole computer. I was one of the only dudes in Rendell dorm with a computer in my room. I know that don't mean nothing to nobody now, but that was significant. My grandmama would send every month. She would send me oodles and noodles, and she would bake a cake, and she would wrap that cake in such a way that it was fresh, all the way from Arkansas to Lincoln University, where I was. There were dope boys. I don't even that didn't want me on the corner, so they would sneak money to me to help me out and encourage me along the way. I made it because there was a community supporting me. There was a community blessing me, and that was huge. That was everything to me. That meant so much to me. And ultimately, all of that, God gets the glory. You don't make it on your own. You got a village supporting you. That's one of the reasons why every Sunday I encourage you, if you don't have a church home, you need to get you a church home. You need a village to support you, to encourage you, to bless you, to push you forward. And you need to recognize that the only thing that's giving you strength is the God that you serve. When they say Jehovah Nissi, the Lord is my banner, they are saying we will never fight for anybody else. We recognize what got us through was the Lord getting us through this fight. And the same God that got us through this fight will get us through the next fight, the fight after that, and the fight after that. When they say, the Lord is my banner, they, number one, created a place of remembrance. that anyone that ever travels this way, because they're not in their home yet, but anyone that comes this way will recognize something awesome happened right here, and it was the Lord's doing, and it was marvelous in our eyes. The Lord is my banner because he fights for me. And I want you to catch the language of this. It's a very subtle thing. The Lord was my banner. The Lord is my banner. Because they understand that even though the fight, we won this time, the fight ain't over. There's going to be some more Amalekites to fight. Because the Lord has sworn the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. That understand there are some fights that don't end with you. There are some fights that your children going to have to fight. There are some fights that your grandchildren are going to have to fight. There's some fights that your great-grandchildren are going to have to fight. But here's our responsibility to tell our children so they can tell their children, so they can tell their children, so they can tell their children about a God that's able to fight your enemies for you. About a God that if you hold up your gift to him, that God will give you the strength to make it through. About a God that has been blessing us, not just now, but has been blessing us from generation to generation. I'm grateful that Jordy and Justin and Jaden knew God for themselves. I'm grateful that me and Jada and Regina know God for ourselves. And I'm grateful that Eugene and Cassandra knew God for themselves. And I'm grateful that Georgia May and Arthur James and Hammer James and Ozenia knew God for themselves. That our generations have passed on. We may not have had money to pass on, but you're going to need some God with you. We may not have had land and property to pass on, but you're going to need this relationship with God for yourself. That we may not have cars to pass on, but you're going to need this right here. This is what will sustain you. The Lord is our banner. And when folk that don't know what happened, look at that banner. Folk that wasn't even born the last time the Cowboys won a Super Bowl. They look at that banner and recognize that this franchise was great. All I'm trying to tell you is that when people see Jehovah Nissi, the Lord is my banner, they recognize that we serve a great God.